Okay. I guess I'm live now. I guess I'm live now. Where is this thing? This thing. I believe I can see the future. 'Cause I repeat the same routine. I think I used to have a purpose. But then again, it might have been a dream. I think I used to have a voice. Now I never make a sound. Okay, shut the fuck up. Hi, Rishi. Can you ask me a question about your career? Sure, you can ask me anything, but I'll probably need your astrological chart to answer it. Because I do not believe in psychics, Sam I am. I do not believe in green eggs and ham. Happy Mars Day! Yes. So funny because I'm a trans woman, but I'm very Martian, you know. Like I got Mars conjunct my sun and trine my ascendant. Excuse me. Every day is exactly the same. Every day is exactly the same. There is no love here and there is no pain. Every day is exactly the same. So please, May 24th. So you just had your birthday too, like me. Gemini, an early Gemini. I was going to use this time and talk about the Venus cycle because we're coming up on the beginning or the midway point, depending on how you look at it. But I'll do a separate video about that and we'll just look at your charts because I only have 2 hours, you know. So if you want your stuff read, please put your information, date, time, city in the comments. Date, time, city. Date, time, city. Happy birthday to you too, my darling. Marie Lynn says happy birthday to me. Thank you. I'm still celebrating my birthday. I'm still celebrating my birthday. China Murphy says, hi, Saturn girl. It's my first live. I'm glad to be here. I'm glad to have you here. Hi, Amber. I hope you're well, too. Gundega. I think I've done your chart before. We'll take a look. I already did stuff for Ms. Colston the other day, so I don't know if you want me to look at your stuff again quickly, but I want to focus on, first of all, like the stream, like the fucking stream, yo. Subscribe to my channel, please. My hair looks so fun. Why did it go out of focus? They did highlights in my hair and gave me little bangs, you know. I didn't know I could do this with my hair. It's pretty awesome. Also, I gladly accept tips and donations. That's how I keep this bullshit going. So you can give to super thanks below. Especially if I do a good reading for you, you know. You can donate below or, you know, super thanks. And then here's my Patreon. So you can also become a member of my channel. Like Ms. Colston is. And there's fun perks, like I always do your shit first, you know. And I'm going to start doing monthly horoscopes by rising sign. Because that's really the only way you can do accurate horoscopes for people in general, is by rising sign. Because that's how you determine the houses in which things are going into. And you have to do whole sign houses, you see. You have to do whole sign houses. Ms. Colston from Nolans. From Nolans, yes. So we'll get right to it. I'll look at Ms. Colston quick, but I just want to show you all what I'm focusing on right now. You see? And we'll go to your fucking charts right away because I'm going to do a whole video about the superior conjunction of Venus, right? Because the superior conjunction, which we're about to have in a few days on June 4th, is part of the Venus synodic cycle, right? The synodic cycle of any planet is the relationship between it and the sun from conjunction to conjunction. You see? In the case of inferior planets, the ones that are closer to the sun than Earth, they never get too far from the sun, right? Like Venus never goes more than 48 degrees away from the sun. Yeah. So there's never an opposition, right? There's what are called inferior and superior conjunctions. The inferior conjunction is when Venus is closest to the Earth, right? And she's moving retrograde. So the sun and her conjoin and then they're ripped apart, you see? Whereas the superior conjunction is when Venus appears to be behind the sun relative to the Earth, you see? So, and they're both moving direct. It's of a different nature, right? And I'm doing a whole video about this, you know? But we can relate each of the phases of the Venus cycle to something in your life, right? And the whole thing is emblematic and symbolically related to the story of the Sumerian goddess Inanna, my mama, who I do devotion to. Even though I'm, pretty well known to be an atheist, kind of. It's more complicated than that. I still do planetary devotion to my dear mommy Inanna, right? It's important and psychologically comforting for me in one context. And I know in another that everything is basically empty ultimately. So, but that's another story for another time. But suffice it to say that the superior conjunction, when the sun and Venus are moving together, represents more about relationships. It's shining a light. We can think of it as sort of the beginning of the Venus cycle for us and symbolically, because it's the beginning of Inanna's story. On the other hand, astronomers and most astrologers start and end the Venus cycle with the inferior conjunction. But we're talking about it in different terms here, you see? So, the inferior conjunction really is like the midway point of the story, right? When my mommy dies in hell and has to be resurrected, right? Like before there was Jesus, there was my mommy, Before there was Persephone, even, there was my mommy. All these later myths and stories are derived from a lot of these Sumerian myths and stories, which Inanna goes back probably to, close to 4000 BCE. Some of these earliest myths are like 3300 BCE. Anyway, I'm going to do a video about this, so I don't want to belabor the subject, but the symbolism has to do with relationships, with union. And the house it's going to occur in for you, that's the whole sign house Gemini is for you, will indicate for the next 1.6 years, 584 days, that's the duration of the Venus cycle. But this sets the tone for the rest of the cycle for you. Sorry, I'm itching. Itchy. But the house will set the tone for the duration of the cycle, you see? So, for example, like I'm looking at the transits for today, which happen to have Libra rising. We'll get to your charts. But you see this conjunction's happening in the 9th house, right? So even though it indicates like support or, dependency to a certain degree, right? How does it play in my chart? We'll look at your chart. In this case, with the 9th house, though, you see the emphasis is being on the relationship to what you believe. And new relationships can emerge at this time, you see. So this person would be especially interested in people who share their deep philosophical views or whatever, right? It's meeting of the minds. Or rather than minds, I guess you could say meeting of the souls. Right? Because this is about the meaning of things rather than just the facts. But I'll look at Ms. Colston and then we'll go on to the next person. But it's just important to recognize the symbolism in general before you start attacking the particular, right? This is about union. It can be about relationships between people, But the nature of those relationships and who they are with will be indicated by the house. So you see, Ms. Colston is a Cancer rising, which means all this is happening in her 12th house, right? This is one of the more difficult spots for this to take place. But the relationship here is mostly upon her own mental health, right? In sense of well-being. You might even think of this as isolated, which seems sort of contradictory to everything I said about relationship. But think about this. This is a relationship that takes you out of public life or removes you from the limelight or the spotlight. It's where we retreat together into sometimes a sense of fantasy, which can be very unhealthy, but sometimes just into our own little world, right? My past ex-partner, the most recent one, we both had a lot of Neptune stuff and some 12th house stuff. And a lot of that indicated retreating into our own little world. And the dangerous thing about that is you can get mired in fantasy, right? You can miss your responsibilities and, not take care of the things that you need to take care of. Yes, that's the stuff of the 6th house. And you see you have a 6th house Mars. Well, Sun and Neptune, all that fun stuff, And Mars rejoices in the 6th house. For those of you who are aware of planetary joys, I'm sure a lot of you aren't, because that's like an ancient astrology thing and isn't really recognized in modern astrology. But the houses, anyway, I don't need to explain it in depth, but certain planets rejoice in certain houses, and those houses partly get their meanings from those planets. And Mars gives a lot of its meaning to the 6th house. Injuries, illnesses, enemies, right? But then the obligations thing, slavery, all that sort of stuff, right? Slavery became obligations and work and service and all that kind of bullshit. But you see what I'm saying? So excuse me. I do take PayPal and Venmo. I should put my, here, let me type it in the chat. Let me type it in the chat. PayPal.me/. It's my dead name before I came out. So, pretty sure that's my PayPal, yeah. Let me just type it in the thing. And then I'll finish up Ms. Colston. I just want to make sure this link is, correct. So I hate doing dead air. I should always be saying something, to keep everything moving. Oh, yeah, that's correct. So that's my PayPal. And yes, I gladly accept donations that way, too. I should put my PayPal on this screen also. I really haven't been doing a lot on my Patreon, and I need to do more. So anyway, as far as Ms. Colston's concerned, we talked about the 12th house emphasis. And the danger of falling into, our own little fantasy and letting the world just kind of drift by. And then things fall apart when we don't attend to them. So that's one thing to be cautious about. And if you do meet a new person, something like that, you just want to be careful if it's people that tend to have addiction issues or mental health issues of their own. Or perhaps they're involved in, some spiritual nonsense. You see guru types here who do communes and cultish kind of shit, because that takes you out of society, that isolates you. And it's kind of mentally batty, isn't it? Which is the 12th house, self-undoing, you see? So, but Jupiter's here for you too. So this indicates a positive thing for you, Ms. Colston, right? The emphasis is going to be on healing. So it's, it's a relationship in a way to your own self-undoing. So whatever self-destructive behavior you've been engaged in for the past, year or so, year and a half, you're now starting a phase where for the next year and a half, the emphasis is going to be on the relationship to your own self-undoing, to that behavior that held you back, right? Or rather, the way of thinking that held you back. Because you see, the 12th house is the house of bad spirit, of bad mental stuff, Whereas the 6th house, the opposite one, is the house of bad physical stuff, you know. So there's the difference for the most part. So just be aware that it does have a positive aspect in that it has to do with healing and all that stuff, right? And facing things, which isn't always comfortable. But yeah, I talked about there could be external relationships, but I think this more has to do with the relationship to yourself. Both the 1st and 12th house would, but the 1st house would be forward thinking and the 12th house would be more regressive thinking. Not necessarily regressive, it has to do with healing, right? To putting oneself slowly back together, as opposed to the 1st house, which is about self-assertion, you see? Self-assertion. But anyway, let's move on to the next person. So first we had Marie Lynn. Marie. Oh, my darling Marie. Marie Lynn. Let me get my... Hi, cat. You are so sweet. Come here, baby. Come here, baby. You are rubbing up on my leg. This is my little boy, Castor. You are so sweet. You are so sweet. You are so sweet. Marie Lynn, right around my birthday. Marie Lynn. Okay. May 24th, 1981. Every day is exactly the same. Every day is exactly the same. Oh, you're spitting on me, cat. Why are you drooling so much? Damn. Does it feel that good? Dang, cat. You're like drooling on me. PM. 4:40 p.m. Every day is exactly the same. There is no love here, and there is no pain. Okay. Okay. Let me just double check. May 24th, 81, 4:40 p.m. Denville, New Jersey. New Jersey. And Marie says my life is nuts right now. I sound like Cyndi Lauper. She's so unusual. She was my first mommy when I was a kid. I remember watching Goonies when I was a kid. In the 80s, I guess. And they had Cyndi Lauper, you know, in the beginning, and her song that she did for the Goonies. And I used to sing it all the time. And I used to sing Girls Just Want to Have Fun, which wasn't really kosher for when, you know, I was a kid. Anyway, here's Marie Lynn's chart. Marie Lynn, and thank you, Ms. Colston, for all your support. You are the best. You are the best. Ms. Colston, you are wonderful. Thank you. I really appreciate you. I really appreciate you. You give me a lot of support. And I don't deserve someone like you. I don't deserve you. And yes, you're my friend. It's so weird, like we develop relationships over all this sort of stuff, you know, because a lot of people who follow me have become friends and clients, you know. Anyway, it can be difficult to blur those lines and boundaries, but for the most part, if we're all mature, it's like, you know, it's cool. It's all cool. But like the fucking stream, subscribe to my channel. Please, please, please. Oh my god, cat hair just went in my water. Ugh. You shed so much. It's like your hair's been growing like mine, you know. So anyway, Miss Colston says she loves Cyndi Lauper too. You know, girls just wanna have fun. Oh, girls just wanna. That's all we really want. Some fun. Anyway, time after time, time after time. If you're lost, you can look and you will find me. Time after time. Alexis Gushel. I hope I said that correctly. I can't figure out how to donate on Patreon. Just do it through my PayPal. That's a lot easier. Just do it through my PayPal. And thank you in advance. Thank you so much. I really appreciate your support. Hi, Shima. Shima's one of my regulars. Yes. Sorry, I'll get to all your shit here. I'm only going to try to spend a couple minutes on each person. Except for members, I typically do a little bit more. God damn! It's cat hair everywhere. It's like on my tits. I know. It felt so good wearing a dress today. You know, it was nice and warm here. It was, ugh. But a couple cis women gave me shitty fucking looks. And I can't tell if it's because I looked slutty with tattoos and shit, or if they could, like, just tell I was trans. I don't know. Or maybe both. Doesn't matter. I just got self-conscious. So this is really interesting for Marie Lynn, because your natal Venus is at 16 degrees Gemini, which is very close to where this silly conjunction is about to be. Yeah? It's at 14 degrees. So conjunct your natal Venus, you see, and you're an early Gemini like me. So Jupiter's about to go over your sun. This is really sort of auspicious for both of us. Now, since you're a Libra rising instead of an Aquarius rising like me, see, you're all air like me, but in the different direction. Okay, bye, cat. Cat's a freak. Cat's a freak. They're both huge. Both giant cats. Castor and Pollux. One of my ex-girlfriends named them after the movie Face Off. I'm like, those are the brothers of the constellations Gemini and the myth of Gemini. The twins. And she's like, no, I named them after the movie Face Off. I'm like, well, that's cool too. It's a pretty good fucking movie. I ain't gonna lie. You know, it's a good movie. Please like the stream if you're just joining us. Please like the stream. Anyway, you're all air like me. It's kind of fun. You know, see, I'm Aquarius rising. You're Libra rising with an Aquarius moon. I'm Aquarius rising with a Libra moon. You know, it's pretty fun. Pretty fun. Sorry, I got cat hair all over me. Yay, Victoria! Victoria. I'm gonna put my PayPal once again in the chat, but you can always donate through PayPal or through YouTube Super Thanks below. The YouTube Super Thanks are the best way to do it because YouTube pays me, which is why I go live on here. You know? But PayPal is the second best. PayPal is the second best. I just put it in the comments. Anyway, thank you for coming, Victoria. So anyway, see, it's the 5th house, Gemini for me. Yours is the 9th. You see, the 5th and the 9th are both making trines to the 1st house. This is always a way that you can sort of quick reference houses, right? The 5th house is a trine, the 9th house is a trine, right? The 10th house is a square, the 4th house is a square, the 11th and 3rd houses are a sextiles, you see? So, anyway, this is in your 9th house, and it's sort of a big fucking deal because it's shining a light on what you believe, your value system, your spiritual path, right? And you already have all these motherfuckers in the 9th house, right? Including your 1st house ruler, which is Venus. Look at all these other motherfuckers that are retrograde. You poor baby. That's rough. You know, Jupiter conjunct Saturn. See, Saturn's your 5th house of children. I bet you're a very sexual person, right? With Moon in the 5th house, Gemini, Venus. You're probably attracted to deep people, though, philosophical types, or people who share your spiritual or political or philosophical views in some way, right? Attracted to the deep types, right? The kinky wizards. The kinky wizards. Yeah. The kinky wizards. I'd expect that's who you like. You like the bad boys and girls, though. You have a bad relationship history. And I say that because Aries is your 7th house. Mars rules it. And Mars is not happy. Mars is not happy in Taurus. Nor the 8th house, right? That's difficult for financial stuff, right? Tends to spend too much money or tends to accrue debt. But on the other hand, it tends to be interested in dangerous type partners. Or partners who end up draining you. or end up becoming psychological trauma. Relationships can cause you a lot of pain, and there's a lot of, um, a lot of healing and introspection that you have to do out of these things. It's a blind spot. It's a blind spot. So Shaima, you want your husband. Cool. Thank you so much, Victoria. You are so sweet. We're going to do you next. Don't worry. I got you next, my love. Thank you, Victoria. And apparently you're brawlless. Okay. I mean, I am right now, too. I guess mine are small enough to where it doesn't really matter, So anyway, but this ninth house emphasis is really important. Well, I was starting to say that you're very sexual. And I wouldn't be surprised if children were in the cards for you, or if you've already had children, with the fifth house moon. Thank you, Shaima. I got you after Victoria. But the other part of that is that Saturn is here. Now he's exalted, or she's exalted. I refer to Saturn as feminine because I prefer that. Without brawl. Well, I'm never without a brawl, but sometimes I'm without a brawl, So, but again, it's only a problem when I look like I'm cutting glass, It's like I'm not trying to break into the federal building or some shit. I shouldn't have said that. That's so stupid. It was a joke. So you have one sun. See, Saturn is exalted here, so it's sort of like, yeah, we're going to have a kid. But she's also retrograde, you see? And when Saturn's retrograde, oftentimes things happen later in life. The good things. I have Saturn retrograde and exalted in Libra as well. So, the good things tend to happen later in life. Or the promises of the rising sign, rather. You see? And you also have Pluto rising, conjunct your ascendant, very closely conjunct your ascendant. So it makes you creepy on the one hand, a creepy kind of person. But on the other hand, it's like a life of constant crisis. And I shouldn't say constant. It's rather that life is punctuated by a series of crises. When we have Pluto on the ascendant, people do not like us, Sam I am. They do not like our green eggs and ham. Right? It gives us a powerful presence. I have Pluto square my ascendant, and I have a similar thing, just a bit more difficult. Right? And there's a weird relationship to power. Oftentimes we see both submissives or dominants or switches, but people who get off on power in some way. Right? There's a sexual attraction or magnetism around power, in the sense of power. So, oftentimes, right? But I do see lives that are rife with conflict and being shattered periodically. And that's how we learn, though. It's like people say Pluto is transformation, but what they really mean is life-shattering crisis, because that's what changes us, and it changes us completely, right? Pluto's on my ascendant right now in transit. I don't necessarily think, well, I should knock on wood, right? But, it remakes our identities, our minds, our appearance. The whole us is the first house. Mind, body, spirit. You see? So just be aware of that. Can't wait to get a full reading. Thank you. Now, anyway, the emphasis here for the next year and a half is going to be on the ninth house, you see. So relish this time to learn new things, to experience new ways of thinking, you see. To try new philosophies. Maybe you get involved in a new spiritual path, or you find a mentor. That's the kind of relationship I think of with the ninth house. I think of teacher-student, mentors, learning something about ontology, right? Being, the bigger questions of the universe, which you're already accustomed to asking with all this ninth house bullshit, That's the kind of relationship I'm talking about. Not necessarily romantic, but, possibly someone who educates you, or who introduces you to a new way of thinking. You see? So anyway, It doesn't surprise me that you only have one child because Saturn's retrograde on the one hand. I'd expect that to have happened, sort of in your 30s, though. Not early on, is what I'm getting at. You see? So anyway, let's move on to the next person. You really tried. I'm sorry, Gundega. I mean, I can't alter my format for one person. Like, I'm trying to make this work for as many people as possible. I'm very sorry. I'm very sorry, my darling. I'm sorry. Sorry. What do you want? What do you want from me? Oh, you're up right now, Gundega. Jesus. Do you want me to still do you right now, or should I not do it? Should I not do you? Should I not do you, Gundega? Gundega. 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 Wait, let me scroll down, see if you said anything. Do you want me? Do you want me, to do you, Gundega? Please tell me. Please tell me if you want me to do you right now, because you were next, April 30th, 1994. I'm sorry, Gundega, that took so long. April 30th, 1994, in Latvia. April 30, 1994. I'll do Gundega, how about that? And you can watch it later. You can watch it later, but I'll do one for you, Gundega. Well, I had other people who donated, gosh. Oh my gosh, I hate how everything works on Solar Fire. Like, when you can't toggle between shit when something's open. Such a pain in the fucking ass. 7:30 a.m. Ogra, Latvia. The Baltic States. Latvia, Lithuania, and Estonia. The Baltic States. Are you able to watch Gundega, or are you going? Thank you, Marie. Thank you, thank you, thank you. I really appreciate you. Thank you. Thank you. Yeah, Amanda Lee, we're getting to people in sequential order when they don't donate. So, you know, we'll get to you, hopefully. Gundega, going once, going twice. 3. Sorry, Gundega. We'll get to you later, but I have your chart in here, sweetheart. I have your chart in here, sweetheart. Oh, you're a Gemini, right? Well, I'll do a really quick thing, even though you're not here, and then we'll get to our wonderful supporters, But really quickly, this is your first house, Gundega. What this is all happening in, and it's relatively close to your ascendant. So again, as I indicated earlier, this is about the relationship to yourself, because Gemini is coming in. Sorry, Jupiter's coming in here, right? Or has arrived. This is also your Venus return. And Jupiter is pretty close to being conjunct your Venus, right? So relationships are generally highlighted at this time, but it's about relationship to yourself, right? Self-assertion, putting yourself out there, right? You probably are attractive in general, or have a reputation for being attractive, But this is about finding confidence within, which can determine all your relationships without. You see, you have a 12th house sun. Oftentimes that indicates difficult time, right? When it comes to confidence and things like that. Saturn is also at the top of the chart, you see, in the 10th house. So it's like life direction is slow coming. And Saturn is square Venus. It's a wide orb, but still I would count it as a square. And that makes us socially awkward, right? It makes us feel left out in groups. It makes us feel like people reject us, or they don't understand us, or whatever. Which is weird for you, because with Venus in the first house, especially in Gemini, right? There's a little bit of an extroversion, right? It's like you expect people to like you, or you expect that you're going to get along with people. But perhaps, a a little bit of narcissism, or I shouldn't say narcissism because gets misconstrued now, but a little bit of your, excuse me, your self-assertiveness, or I want to say confidence, but confidence is the wrong word. It's like haughty behavior. It's like the girl in high school who thinks she's hot shit, which is different from confidence. There might be a certain degree of arrogance or, attention grabbing, stuff like that. And at the same time, that's confusing when you have Saturn square and it's like, I'm awkward and people don't get me. But at the same time, like, you have groups of people around you. And you probably feel like you always have to impress people, right? And that doesn't help either. And see, with all this stuff going into your first house, you have to use the next year to year and a half in order to let go of all that nonsense, right? You have a Capricorn moon. You hate being vulnerable with people, and it's in the 8th house. You're hiding from yourself. You probably had a very not nice mother, right? Not a very nice mother, and probably felt quite restricted by her, or maybe you carry around a lot of pain. Now you have Chiron in the 4th house, which makes me think you have daddy issues too. But Saturn in the 10th house also indicates difficulties with the mother. You see? So there's an emotional stunting that you had. And when we have that sort of thing, it makes us like really look for attention from other people, And so the awkwardness and then the desire for attention are sort of in tension with each other. They're in opposition. So the key here is like cultivating confidence, which comes from letting things go and learning to not really care so much about what people think about you or so much about your appearance or how you look on the outside. It's more about the content of your character on the one hand, but it's also about learning through accomplishment, because confidence comes from doing shit, right? Anyway, let's move on. Who's saying shit down here? Anyway, if you have time, I'm sure I'm curious about Trump's prospects. Well, I am transgender. So, Trump winning the presidency could mean a lot of awful things for me, because I'm not sure if you're aware, but the Republican Party, in conjunction with 50 conservative think tanks led by the Heritage Foundation, released Project 2025, which is their plan for how they're going to conduct the next Republican administration, which it looks like Trump is probably going to win. Biden is not setting himself up very good, and he doesn't realize his base is not in favor of genocide. You see, most of the base, especially young people, are not in favor of genocide. And he will be remembered for that, unfortunately. Not the good stuff he's done, which he has done some good stuff, you see. But the thing that really sucks is that he's basically handing the election over. And Trump, if you look at his zodiacal releasing, for those of you who know what that is, Trump is going to be having the major peak period of his life starting in 2025 in Leo, 1st house. However, that is going to be a difficult period for him because Mars is in the house as well. I don't want him to win because they would make me illegal. I just got my passport done just in case. You never know. Like, in their plan, they say they want to get rid of trans people. They want to eliminate us. Now, what does that mean and what does that look like? I don't know. But last time people said that kind of shit was 1933 in Germany. Hitler came to power in 1934. You see, when Saturn was in Pisces like it is, or that was Saturn in Aquarius. But all the Nuremberg laws were passed while Saturn was in Pisces in 1935, right? Those were the laws that stripped away the rights of Jews, basically. Now, before then, they came after trans people first. They attacked the clinic of Dr. Magnus Hirschfeld, who was one of the first ever medical professionals to, study treatment for people with gender dysphoria. He performed the first ever sexual reassignment surgery. You see? And they burned down, the Nazis, the brown shirts, burned down his clinic and burned, that was the first book burning. It was of transgender care material. So you see, I'm scared for my life. I'm legitimately and sincerely scared for my life. So luckily I have a lot of support. So there are other people who aren't so lucky. And I'm in one of the best states for people like me. But still, and I'm only telling you this because I do not support genocide. I completely hate what's going on. On the other hand, though, I don't want to die. I don't want to end up in a camp or anything like that. And I don't think I'm being hyperbolic. So, and, I mean, to be honest, Trump would be even worse when it comes to Gaza and the Middle East. So, anyway, I won't keep going on about this, you see, because I think it's not interesting to most of you, but it's something to be aware of. It should be interesting to you because it will affect your life. I don't care what country you're in. I do not care what country you're in. This will affect your life. And we're coming into the Uranus return, the third Uranus return of the United States. Uranus was in Gemini during the American Revolution. Uranus went into Gemini at the Civil War. Uranus went into Gemini again during the U.S. involvement in World War II. And Uranus is about to go into Gemini again in 2027. And I am predicting not nice stuff. And I'm not going to talk about it right now. But I've talked about it elsewhere. And I do predict not nice stuff. And I hope Trump doesn't win, but I think he probably will. And even if he doesn't, there will still be a massive conflict. There will still be a massive conflict. So anyway, we talked about Gundega. Let's move on. You think I should do a whole segment on this? I mean, I will, but anytime I do political material, people get really turned off. In this community especially, the spiritual community, I'm sorry, is fucking gross. There's so much weird, veiled white supremacy and fascism. It's because people came at it and they don't realize that most of their spiritual beliefs in the West are really informed by theosophy by Madame Blavatsky, which is all rife with anti-Semitism and homophobia. And high-level Nazis were inspired by Madame Blavatsky, you know? I mean, she herself was, in my opinion, a charlatan and a con artist, a grifter. But some people took her very seriously, right? And all her racist nonsense. Amanda Lee, YouTube donation is probably the easiest, but PayPal is the second best or easiest. So whichever of those two is easiest for you. Now we're going to close Gundega's chart. You think young astrology lovers might like it? I think the young ones would. I need to start going live on Twitch where I can get a younger audience, because I think the younger people would like that. I think you're right. You know, it's older people that get all fucking weird. Like the boomers and most of my audience is Gen X. Most of my audience is Gen X. I'm technically a millennial, but I'm like an elder millennial. But yeah, a lot of my audience gets really turned off by my politics, to be honest with you. So, okay, let's go to the next person before I go crazy. Did we do Victoria? No, we got to do Victoria. Victoria. My Queen Victoria. My Queen Victoria. She was born on 4/20, just like Hitler. That was bad. That was bad. 4/20. 7:57 a.m. But yeah, politics is my first love before astrology, really. I've been practicing astrology for a long time, but I never thought I could actually make this a career, right? It just sort of bounced in my lap after a failed relationship like everything else does. But Shreveport. My mom lived in Shreveport for a bit. But I was involved in political organizing, like back 2015, 2016, like pretty much all the way till 2020, you know. And then one of my girlfriends didn't want me to be involved in activism and demonstrations and stuff. Like I helped organize a demonstration down to the border when I lived in San Diego, you know, and then it was during the whole refugee crisis. And cops fired rubber bullets on the refugees on the other side of the, you know, the border wall, the fence or whatever. And it was just a really, you know, it was a really crazy thing. But we did, I mean, I participated in organizing several events. So it's just hard when you have a child and, you know, I was married back then, everything else. So Victoria, you have another 12th house sun. That's quite difficult, isn't it? But the sun is exalted, right? That's a nice thing. That's a nice thing. That's a nice thing. The sun rules. The sun rules. The 4th house. The sun rules the 4th house. So my guess is like either dad was an alcoholic or a recovering alcoholic, or had mental health issues but was able to keep them under control, right? It would be a balance type thing. That's what I would guess. So, but usually 4th house ruler in the 12th house, like dad was either had mental health or substance issues, you know? But when it's exalted like that in Aries, I think, well, gee, you know, they probably were able to take care of that pretty well. But I imagine that some of those issues kind of came down on you as well with your sun in the 12th house, you know? So just stuff to be careful of. Like I don't know if that's necessarily true or not, but I mean, you could say Saturn is trine the sun. It's a really wide orb. But you could say Saturn is trine the sun. Well, Uranus is trine the sun, I guess, more. That gives for a whimsical personality, right? Can't fit in anywhere you go, but you don't care about fitting in anyway, do you? You know? Mars and Gemini, terrible arguer. So your 2nd house is Gemini here. So everything's going to be focused in your 2nd house with this Venus and Jupiter stuff and the superior conjunction. So this is your relationship to your stuff, you know? This is learning to have a healthy relationship to your resources. You know, to start having an attitude of abundance. When Jupiter was in my 2nd house, I started my business. That's oftentimes when we start an enterprise. That's what it could be. Your relationship to your livelihood is what changes. So oftentimes either it's starting a business or starting a new career, you know, starting to manage our livelihood in a new way. Right? And Pluto's going through your 10th house, which totally remakes our life direction. Oftentimes forces us in a brand new direction. And that'll probably be when Pluto is closer to your midheaven. But still, I think the next year and a half is at least a prelude to that, if not a bigger event itself, you know. Mercury rules your 2nd house and is in the 12th house. So I imagine money's been difficult, right? Like typically money is difficult with that. You see. Amanda, thank you so much. I really appreciate it. I really appreciate it. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Dad had some depression, was a child of an alcoholic. Well, see, yeah, there you go. It's still a exalted sun. So there's something okay about, you know, nice about it. Something more exalted about it, right? The sun has some dignity, even though the sun sucks in the 12th house, you see. I'm not trying to be mean. I'm just saying it's rough, I tell you. It's a rough go. And you see the moon is square the sun. That means you have a last quarter moon. So these are people who are very critical, right? People who are very resistant to things, resistant to change. They can be very, you know, I mean, the first quarter sort of faces a lot of opposition and building things up. And it's like the last quarter faces opposition and tearing them down. That's what I mean, like, being negative, deconstructing things. More about being resistant to change, right? Resistant to change. The moon in the ninth house is a kid who asks the big questions when he or she is younger. Like, why is this all a thing? But the moon is very unhappy in Capricorn. So, I mean, it sucks when we can't share our emotions or when we're terrified of being vulnerable. But I also imagine there were issues with siblings or extended family in some way. But I imagine either one of your siblings is involved in academia or the law, or you had a bad relationship with a sibling, right? Or something like that. But who knows? I like change, but I'm resistant to the Southern lifestyles here. I mean, that's another thing. You can be resistant to the environment you find yourself in, which isn't always a bad thing. The waning cycle of the moon is sort of like the critical reflecting phase, or the critical reflecting half of the lunar cycle, if you will. Whereas the waxing half is like, the forward thinking, planning, building things up sort of half. And it's not always good stuff. Like sometimes the waning half says, no, that shit didn't work, yo. You know? Siblings were always in legal trouble. That's ninth house, the law. So there you go. That makes sense, you see. But everything being focused in your second house is quite important because I imagine you've had money issues. So this is putting the emphasis, right? Because you have Mars and Chiron in the second house. This is putting the emphasis on building up your own little empire, right? Building up your own stuff, building up your material resources, you see. So for the next year and a half, it's about cultivating a healthy relationship between you and your material resources, your income, right? Budgeting yourself. You could meet a financial planner or an accountant, Anyway, let's move on to the next person. Victoria, I thank you for beating the shit out of me. I see things so clearly now. I choose my destiny. Oh, Billy, I knew I had it in ya. Sorry, it was Billy Madison. I don't know why. Oh, because of Victoria. That's why I was thinking of it. So, Shaima wants her husband's chart done. Shaima hubby. Husband. And Shaima's husband is 6/1, 1971. 6/1/71, 6:10 a.m. Baghdad. Did you know that the city of Baghdad was established, or it was established according to the predictions and the electional chart produced by a Jewish astrologer? What year was that? What year was that? I'm sorry, it's just going to bug me if I don't look. Baghdad. 762. The year 762. Gosh, that's not that old, really, in terms of things. You can leave your info, Amanda, in the chat here. If you're comfortable doing that, that's typically what we do here. If you're really not comfortable with that, then we'll figure something else out. But that's typically what we do here, Iraq. So Shaima's husband has a bunch of 12th house fucking stuff too. That's rough. Gosh. Saturn rejoices in the 12th house, but there's still a sense of isolation that comes from that. That's quite difficult, you see. Oftentimes we don't feel like we relate to anyone. We feel like a pariah. You see? Can make us reclusive. Venus is very happy, but still in the 12th house. Right? That can make someone either a therapist or who works with the pain of others, or people who are jailers, right? Who work in prison systems or hospital settings, stuff like that. Mental institutions, social work. That's often a big thing, you see. Jupiter rules the 10th house and is in the 7th. That's usually sort of a powerful position for the 10th house ruler. You know, it can help for success. But you see, your husband's Gemini rising. So once again, this is all being focused in the first house of self. So this all has to do with the relationship to self. Our sense of identity and confidence and all that. Self-assertion. And it looks like, you know, I mean, he's got a first house sun. And this will be relatively close to his sun. When we see first house suns, we think of people who already have an inflated sense of self-importance, like my mother, you know, or Sarah Palin. I always think of those two people first. So another thing to be aware of. But everything's going to be focused in his first house, you see, which could make him either pompous a little bit, feelings of grandeur, really self-important. But it's also good because you see this 12th house stuff is very awkward. You see? Saturn. Moon trine Venus. Virgo moon. I mean, people-pleasing type stuff I think of. He's probably very nice, has a difficult time lying. I imagine people like him. He just feels like left out and alone. Like he's got Chiron in the 11th house too. And that typically means we're rejected by our peers and we don't get a lot of support from people. We feel very alone. And we usually are suspicious of people and groups and stuff like that. So we tend to have a close-knit group of friends as we get older. People who we can really trust. And I imagine he had a bad experience of religion as a child, but is very interested in spirituality, at least later in life, and he's trying to figure out like what he believes or what his way is or whatever. You see? So, but everything coming up, all this superior conjunction shit is focused in the first house, which shines a light on the relationship to self. So if there is an unhealthy relationship to oneself, if one feels arrogant or self-aggrandizing, then we'll be faced with our weaknesses. It's ultimately beneficial, even though it can be painful to the ego, you know. But this is all good stuff, right? It's Venus and Jupiter relatively close, and the sun relatively close to the natal sun. So very important stuff. You know, this is a great transit for him. It's a great, excuse me, transit for him. It just may deflate his ego a little bit or let some air out of the sails, right? Because he might have an overabundance of it. But you see, there's a weird sort of tension or schism between the sense of being one's own enemy because of all the 12th house stuff, like probably having a lot of shitty self-talk, like you're a piece of crap and you're not good at this, you'll never be good at this, no one likes you, right? But then at the same time, again, wanting attention, wanting the sun to shine on the self, the sense of self, you know, wanting accolades, looking for validation sometimes through others. So you see, those are all potentials here. He is a biomedical engineer. I mean, there you go. Yeah. Biomedical engineer. It's relatively successful. Excuse me. Relatively successful, it sounds like. Well, let's move on to the next person. Next person is Amanda Lee, because Amanda Lee was so kind and donated. Thank you, Amanda Lee. You are so sweet. You are so sweet. I should like all these. I didn't know I could. I didn't know I could like all this. I didn't know I could like all this. Okay. Amanda Lee. Please like the stream, people, if you haven't already. Please, please, please. Heather, how are you? Like the stream and subscribe to my channel, please. Please, please, please. We're doing donation people first, okay? We're doing donation people first. Donation people first. So we've got Amanda Lee. Amanda Lee, where's your stuff? Where's Amanda Lee's information? Where's Amanda Lee's information? Amanda Lee. Amanda Lee. Where's your information? There you are, July the 12th. July 12th, 1985. I'm 1983. Rochester, New York. What time was that? 1:07 a.m. 1:07. 1:07. Excuse me. Excuse me. Excuse me. Amanda Lee. Amanda Huggin Kids. I used to have a friend named Amanda who I used to call Amanda Conda. Amanda Conda. And I used to also call her Mandy Kane. Mandy Kane and Amanda Conda. I thought it was funny. So we have a Taurus rising with Moon in the first house. Moon in the first house also feels a sense of self-importance, right? Oh, and you have Mars combust like I do. That's Mars conjunct the Sun. Close like that, you see? That's combust. It makes us more aggressive. Although your Mars isn't happy in Cancer. Mars rules the 7th house too. So again, I wonder if you've had difficult times in relationships. Plus Saturn's in the 7th house. Saturn tends to make us hyper independent in the 7th house because we somewhere along the lines we learned that we couldn't trust people or rely on people, right? So it's like, oh, do it myself. Leave me alone. And the hyper independence too is sort of an indication of insecurity, isn't it? Because we don't trust people and we're, quite frankly, oftentimes we're afraid they're going to screw shit up. And we have these walls that we put up. So we never get really too close to people because that's frightening. And then you have Pluto opposite your ascendant, right? On the descendant. And that's another indicator of sort of, you know, the power stuff that we talked about earlier with Pluto conjunct and square the ascendant, right? There's sometimes an unhealthy fascination or a sexual attraction or, you know, fixation in some way with power and power relations. It can make someone submissive, can make someone dominant or domineering, it can make someone both, depending on the context. You know, but there's a dark sort of quality to it. You know, that whole death, gothy, sort of dark nature just bleeds through us, unfortunately. Or fortunately, you know, we tend to walk into a room and piss people off because we have a powerful presence, you see? And that puts people off. And, you know, they're like, well, who the fuck does she think she is? You know? Look at her, walking like that, flipping her hair. You know? Like, we just exude this sort of presence, whether we want to or not. And it pisses people off. Just what happens, you know, pisses people off. Now for Taurus rising, and Moon is exalted, you know, Moon ruling the 3rd house. I bet you're a smooth talker. A smooth talker. You are. And you have a Leo Mercury opposite Jupiter. Mercury in Leo is already the queen of the bullshitters, right? Like George W. Bush has that. Bill Clinton has that. Barack Obama has that, right? All 3 of them have Mercury and Leo. And think of what the shit they said. Like Bill Clinton says, well, it depends on what the definition of is, right? George Bush said, I'm the decider, right? I decide stuff. Mercury, Leo. And Obama, I remember watching a video of him when he started his 2008 campaign. Like his little sign fell off and he's like, y'all know who I am. You know who I am. Right? This is all Mercury and Leo shit. And then Mercury opposite Jupiter is it's also a bullshitter. It exaggerates everything. The exaggerator. right? I think Colin Powell had this, or had Mercury square Jupiter. The exaggerator. The fish was this big, right? This is yellow cake uranium. Iraq and Saddam Hussein are producing loads of this. Well, no, they weren't. The exaggerator. I'm not saying it's anything bad. You could be a good salesperson. You could probably sell a ketchup popsicle to a woman in white gloves. You could sell hair dye to Mr. Clean. Billy Mays has Mercury in Leo. No, wait, there's more. OxyClean. Mighty Mendit, right? No, if you buy right now. It's the same kind of bullshit, Not necessarily bad. It can be used for good. It can be very persuasive. And I bet you're a good talker also because the sun in the third house. But, Mars there also is just sharp tongue, sharp words. But I bet you're very passive aggressive with them. You might be kind of clever when it comes to like comebacks and retorts and all that kind of shit. But you're also not going to be head-on confrontational necessarily, even though you're very aggressive and you probably do have a bad temper. I know Mars conjunct my sun in Gemini. I'm very aggressive and I'm very reactive, But when Mars is in Cancer, it's a little bit more whiny, It's more turned inward, right? It talks shit after the fact. Or it just gets resentful, So. But everything's going to be focused in your second house here, and you're the third Gemini Venus we've had on here. Or maybe even the fourth. I mean, this is pretty fucking wild. I haven't been keeping track. But everything is going to be focused in your second house, which once again, we've talked about that, but it has to do with the relationship to your resources. So hopefully you were paying attention to what I said then, because I don't want to repeat a lot of it, except for the fact that it has to do with... once again, learning how to manage yourself properly, to have an attitude of abundance on the one hand, but to not be stupid about it, right? This is developing a healthy relationship to what you have, right? Your life motif with the North Node in the first house is learning to cultivate real confidence, not so much arrogance, which the moon in the first house tends to be arrogant, just assumes it's the fucking best, right? And the moon is square Jupiter. Once again, pompousness. I'm the best, yada, 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 yada. So, I mean, you might have terrible confidence and stuff like that with the moon opposite Saturn. And that's also a difficult, it's a wide orb, but still I'll call it an opposition. You see, it usually confers mama trauma. Difficult or domineering mother. Also, we see mental health issues, with moon opposite Saturn. We see body dysmorphia, people who think they're gross and disgusting, even when they're quite attractive, right? Like I have that. I have moon conjunct Saturn, and I've always had body dysmorphia, even though people tell me I'm conventionally attractive, And actually, after coming out, I feel more attractive, to be quite honest. And when people say, like, oh, you were so hot before, I'm like, fuck you. Like, where were you back then? I felt miserable, and now I'm happy. I have a lot more positive attention now because I'm more confident and happy, you see. So learning how to, give yourself a break, how to take pride in the things that you do. Well, not even pride necessarily. How to appreciate your accomplishments, right? And it's okay to feel attractive. It's okay to feel attractive. It's not bad. But again, you probably had a difficult time with money, when you were younger. And now it's time to start to get all your affairs in order with that, with your material life. So we should move on to the next person. Culpeper is like, my Mars is in Cancer. LMAO. Lamau. Anyway, I like this for you. The eclipses too. Right? The eclipses are going back and forth between your 6th and 12th house now. So this is all about healing anyway also. Like the next, year and a half also. Personal resources, but also like, not spending too much energy on other people. because you need to focus a bit on yourself here. And I don't mean in a self-aggrandizing way. I mean in sort of like an introspective, like, what does it all mean? How do I fit into this? Like, how can I make myself live more constructively and more in harmony with the way things are, you know? Right? Rather than constantly trying to imagine how things could be different. If you want them to be different, you have to make them different. Can't sit there and whine about it. Doesn't do anyone any good, especially you. So that's Amanda Lee. Thank you so much for your donation, my love. And who is after Amanda Lee? Gundega's already gone. China is next. Are you still here, China? Before I get to your chart, please confirm that you're still here, my darling. China, China, are you still here? China, please, my darling. My dear China. Like the wrestler China, you know. China, are you here, China, please? Please tell me, China. If China's not here, if China is not here, then we'll go to Ginger. China, are you here, my love? I'm going to give you a couple more seconds. Yes! Yay, China, you're here. Yay, China, you're here. I think there might be a delay in the chat, too. I'm sorry. I don't know. I don't know how all this shit works. But China is here. Thank you, China. China Murphy. China Murphy. August 13th, 1990. August 13th, 1990. When I see China Murphy, I start thinking of an Irish accent. Murphy. 1990, 8:19 a.m. 8:19 a.m. And it's Nolans. 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 Okay, so I have August the 13th, 1990, 8:19 a.m. Nolans. Nolans. Cool. Cool, cool, cool. So here we go. We have a Virgo rising here with Mercury rising in Virgo in the first house. It's a lot of first house people shit here today. We're at the 12th house sun. Oh my god. So many 12th house suns tonight. So many Gemini Venuses. And so many people with shit in the first house, right? 12th house, first house stuff. And then Gemini Venus. You have a Cancer Venus, though, like I do. We get very clingy. And look at you. You have an exalted Jupiter. Jupiter in Cancer. What degree is it? 28. 28. Oh, it misses the Jupiter bound of Cancer. Misses the Jupiter bound of Cancer. What about... No. Still, exalted Jupiter. That's very nice. That's very nice. Mars conjunct the moon in Taurus. So Mars isn't happy, you know. Although Taurus. No. No. I was seeing if Mars had any extra dignity, but it doesn't look like it. Your moon is exalted in the 9th house. You're another one of those deep babies that asked all the big questions when I think you're a she, saying that, I'm sorry. When she was a baby, when she was a child, what does it all mean? And you probably had a bad experience of religion with Mars in the 9th house. I imagine you did. And I wonder if you had any siblings that went into law or academia or spirituality at all, religion, religious siblings, perhaps. But you see, Pluto is opposite your moon. That's also mama trauma. I have Pluto conjunct my moon. It's very similar. Oftentimes it's abusive and domineering mothers. Oftentimes it can be the bipolar coaster, right? We have mental health issues that come from it. We get very, very deep emotions. We get abandonment issues. You see BPD features sometimes, borderline personality disorder type stuff. Doesn't mean that you have it or nothing like that. It's just, you see this extreme sort of intensity when it comes to relationships and emotions. It's like we soar to these ecstatic heights before we plunge to unfathomable lows. It's like going from heaven to hell, every week. Rapid cycling, I mean, I take medication, no harm in that, you see. But you just have to be aware of that tendency. And with Mars conjunct the moon here, it's very erratic. I don't mean erotic, although you might have some of that. But it's erratic. It's unpredictable, right? Flies off the handle. Mom probably had a bad temper, right? Mom may have been a bit unpredictable too, like my mom was. But you see here, that also lends itself to you having a bit of a temper. And perhaps you're a very passionate person in general. You know who else has this? Bernie Sanders has this. Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, right? AOC, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. She has this, right? Makes for a very passionate person. People who really believe in what they're doing and put their maximum energy into it. But it can also have a very bad temper, and it can be very impulsive, you see. So just something to be aware of. You also have a 12th house sun. Now the sun is very happy in Leo, right? You're a Leo and all this sort of stuff, right? I love Leos. I've dated a lot of Leos. A lot of Leos. Like 4 Leo suns or 5? Several Leo moons, 4 or 5 Leo risings, Anyway, I've been through the zodiac more times than my mama Venus, right? I'm not saying I'm a slut, but, well, I am, I am. You see, but it's the dichotomy here of being a spiritual person and having a wound from spirituality. And having a wound from spirituality. So very important stuff, right? And with the sun in the 12th house, it can, it can give us mental health issues or substance issues, but the sun is still very happy. So it's nothing that you can't work through, whatever it is. It may be just hiding your light under a bushel. It may be being afraid to be out in public or to be connected to people. Maybe you feel more comfortable in your own little fantasy. Like I see people who do cosplay or Dungeons and Dragons or, get caught up in video games or caught up in some fantasy world or, role playing, comic books, anything that takes you out of reality. You just got to make sure it's not an unhealthy relationship. Let me look at the chat and see if I'm anywhere close. Ginger said, I love your voice as an accent. Thank you. Facts, I have bipolar 2. I have bipolar 2 too. I have bipolar type 2 also. So, and one of my psychiatrists said with borderline features, but not borderline. So those are things to be aware of, you see. Now, the other thing to be aware of is that Mercury in Virgo, rising like that in the first house, Mercury rejoices in the first house. The first house is the whole you, mind, body, spirit. Mercury represents how we think, speak, express. It is sort of like the mind. Now, the sun is like the divine mind or the soul spark of the divine mind within us. Now, the rising sign is also the soul. It's the potentiality. It's like the Dharma, what we're here to do this life, right? And Virgo rising is about self-investigation. That's what it's about. Everything should be about self-investigation, but Virgo rising in particular. And when Mercury's there, rising, It's a very intelligent person. The thing you have to be aware of, though, is being enamored by your own mind and intelligence. The minute you start feeling like too smart for people, or like people are always dumb, you're going to miss the important things. And I know because I have that sort of issue too myself. You know, you might feel like the smartest person in the room, even though you have terrible self-confidence with the 12th house sun, probably. But your mind is the most important asset for you. Mercury rules your whole chart and then is in a very powerful position, angular, in their sign of exaltation and rulership. You know, that's a very powerful Mercury, and it rules your 10th house too. So I imagine you have some sort of career success or, you know, good reputation or notoriety that comes up from this. You know, it's a very prominent position. I'd be surprised if you hadn't had anything like that, but, you know. And then Jupiter exalted in the 11th house, right? Chiron being there makes you feel left out as a kid, right? Like the last kid picked for dodgeball. But when Jupiter's exalted there, like Billy Corgan, Virgo rising with Jupiter exalted in the 11th house, Steve Jobs, Virgo rising, Jupiter exalted in the 11th house. You see, there's lots of famous Virgo risings with an exalted Jupiter in the 11th house. I don't necessarily say you're going to be famous, but that does lend itself to a very prominent position, you know? A very prominent position. Saturn being opposite. Now, Saturn's happy in Capricorn too, but see, that takes it down a peg also. But it's very prominent. I mean, I expect some modicum of success as you get older, to be honest with you. Now, Venus conjunct Jupiter can be very self-indulgent, though. Like drinking too much, eating too much drugs, too much whatever, right? Like, you know, it's the pleasure center. But at the same time, Saturn in the 5th house, retrograde, either there's problems with childbirth. We see things like infertility, or people who don't want children, or, you know, I'm assuming you have a uterus, right? People who have C-sections, complications during childbirth, gestational diabetes, sometimes miscarriages. But usually it's a difficulty, right, with the childbirth process. Usually the miscarriages is the 5th house ruler in the 8th house, or the 8th house ruler in the 5th house. Like, that's just something I've seen a pattern of. The other thing with the 5th house Saturn is, you know, not being able to have fun. There's a sense of like being an old person when you're little, being way too serious, like needing to cut loose, like needing to chill the fuck out. You know what I'm saying? So, and Saturn will trine your ascendant. That's actually pretty good. Saturn being trine your ascendant and your Mercury gives you more focus, more endurance, you see? You do have a rancid temper. My mom was cool, but extremely erratic. Yeah. Anyway, you see how the Gemini stuff is going to be focused in your 10th house, which is very prominent. So this is your relationship to your life direction and your career. Right? This is a very prominent thing to have. Very prominent thing to have. Now, you could make relationships more difficult because Jupiter doesn't like Gemini and rules Pisces. But this is a very prominent thing. It indicates to me new opportunities arising. You see? Venus in the 10th house is a time to get your resume together. But to me, this indicates a new relationship to your life direction. You may find that you change career paths, right? And something in the beginning of June may spark your interest and indicate the way that you will eventually go. Like you're going to see an attraction or a pull in a new direction. So just be aware of that. Because the eclipses are also going between your 2nd and 8th house, and that has to do with your money and your finances. So you see how that can be tied to career. Now let's move to the next person after China. China. I need to go quicker on these fucking readings. We got Ginger. Plainview, Texas. I know where Plainview is. Plainview, Texas. Ginger. Ginger. I love Ginger. It reminds me of Gilligan's Island, which you wouldn't know. Oh, you were born in 1964. You would know Gilligan's Island. So you know about Ginger and the professor. A 3-hour tour. A 3-hour tour. I'm Saturn girl. I like old stuff. My parents raised me on 1960s television. I was born in 1983, and they raised me on 1960s television. You see? And old movies. When my dad was in Iraq in Desert Storm in the early 90s, my grandfather took care of us every night and had us watch fucking Alfred Hitchcock and, what was his name? Mary! Oh, Mary, please. Mr. Potter. What was his name? Jimmy Stewart. Jimmy Stewart movies, right? I was thinking of It's a Wonderful Life, which Ginger knows about that, but a lot of you probably won't. I do have an older audience, though. I have to fix that. 12:53 p.m., I assume. Because you probably would have said 0 dark 50. I assume. Plainview. Taxes. Oh, what county? Oh, Hale. You already told me. Yay, Hale County. You're so good. You're so good, Ginger. Thank you, Ginger. You are so good to me. You gave me the county. So Ginger's a Capricorn rising like my daughter, and we have another Capricorn moon. We've had like 3 or 4 Capricorn moons. Once again, very difficult position for the moon. She's not happy there because she rules Cancer. It makes it very difficult for her to flow, to share her feelings, right? Capricorn moon is very rigid. It's very fearful underneath the surface, right? It's sort of like, I always joke, right? Like, I think some of you have heard me say this already, but remember the movie Bambi? Remember the scene where the hunter kills Bambi's mom? You know? It's like that must be what Capricorn moon feels like all the time, you know? Boom. But seriously though, moon in the first house is very, very, it needs attention. It feels a sense of self-importance very innately, you know. It's a deep-seated thing like, hey, pay attention to me. I have a destiny. I'm important. I want an Oompa Loompa now. But you see, the moon, oh, you're welcome, China. You're welcome, China. You're welcome, China. Yeah, China, I think you're going to have a new light shown on your life direction this year. So enjoy it, right? Have some optimism. It's okay to feel good about shit. And difficult things will still happen, okay? Just be poised and prepared for whatever comes. That's what astrology is about. Fate. Astrology is about fate. It's the stuff that happens to you that you can't control. But what's destiny? What's dharma? Dharma's a potential, isn't it? It's how you respond. It's how you respond to those things. GDP glam, CDP glam, what can you tell me about my love life? I could tell you a lot about your love life, but we have a queue of charts going on. We have a queue. So you can put your information in here. But we're getting to things, you know, as we can. Of course. Of course, of course, of course. Of course. So anyway, Capricorn moon, quite difficult because we hate being vulnerable with the Capricorn moon. It's absolutely terrifying to be. China says, I really appreciate you. Needed that pep talk. That's the thing about astrologers and why they suck. And especially a lot of young astrologers who learn all this stuff, all the technical part, but they don't have the life experience, you know? No, it's okay, CDP, it's okay. It's okay, please subscribe to my channel. It's okay, I don't want to chase you off. I'm a bitch, I'm sorry. I don't mean to be abrasive. It's a combination of neurodivergence and bipolar stuff, so. Yes, I'm so happy to have you here, CDP. Please subscribe. And if you keep following me, I will eventually get to your chart, you know? So, because I do lives a couple times a week now. Couple times a week, you see. So anyway, um, and I was talking about how terrifying it is to be vulnerable, you know. Oh, what sucks about a lot of astrologers is they don't have the actual life experience. I specialize in trauma because I've been through a lot of trauma. You know, I've been through 90% of what most of my clients have been through, right? Usually I've been through very similar experiences to them, and I can relate and I can articulate things that are useful and helpful because I have a modicum of understanding of how they feel. You know, I don't need to go through the whole laundry list, but I've been through physical, mental, and emotional abuse from childhood on through relationships. I've been through narcissistic abuse in relationships. I've been through suicide multiple times, you know, in particular with my father. Been through physical abuse with my parents, right? I've been through sexual assault, you know. I've been through lots and lots and lots of interesting things. I've had an interesting life with lots of twists and turns. I've been through spiritual abuse. I've been through like spiritual groups, right? Obviously, I've been through gender dysphoria, mental health issues, right? Substance issues and things like that. These are all things I have experience with, and I can relate to people on many different levels. So that's why people come to me, because I have all the technical shit. I have it pretty well down. I know my stuff. I know spirituality and philosophy pretty well because I've studied them since I was a child. But the big thing, what makes me good as an astrologer, is the relatability, because chances are I've been through what you've been through or had a close person to me who has, right? And I can relate to it in some way. So anyway, I mean, that's why people come to me. So now as far as Gemini, that's your 6th house. So everything is focused there. And that's where your North Node is, Ginger. So you see, the big thing here is about physical healing and getting your life in order. I imagine the last year or so has felt sort of like willy-nilly. You know, I'm not keeping track of shit. You know, I'm not keeping track of my things because I'm just doing stuff, right? There's a whimsical nature to Jupiter having gone through your 5th house. Yeah. And that's where your natal Jupiter is. So you had your Jupiter return for the past year. Now Jupiter's in your 6th house. And it's like, you need to get your life fucking together. And the superior conjunction is happening here. So it's shining a light on a health issue or an obligation that you've been neglecting or shirking in some way. So this is a time where we need to organize ourselves, right? If you've been avoiding responsibilities in a certain way, or things have been seeming too daunting, I know how that is. I've been having that sometimes too. You know, Cancer's my 6th house, and I'm in a 6th house perfection year. Anyway, you don't need to know about that, but this is a healing type of transit. The difficult part is it shines a light on what needs to be healed. This is a relationship to your physical resources. The 6th house is the stuff that falls apart when we don't take care of it and attend to it. You see? Like our health, like our bodies. You don't take care of your body, it starts falling apart. I should know. So I'm trying to take care of it now. You know? And like I said, it's arranging your life so that you get stuff done. You take care of your duties rather than just kind of drifting from one thing to another and constantly asking for forgiveness or asking for help. It's not like you can't ask for help, but you got to learn to rely on yourself a little bit too, you know? Or not even rely on yourself, because you have the moon in the 1st house, so you maybe have a complex around that. But learning to ask for help and accept things from others, and that you don't have to lose pride from that sort of thing, you see? Now, Saturn in the 2nd house often feels like it grows up poor. I don't know if you actually did or not. It's a happy Saturn. but it's retrograde. So I expect anything good happening with money happens later in life. Although you were born in 1964. My sister was born in 1965, you know. So I'm accustomed to that. My sister was actually born, I think, when my dad was in Vietnam. I'm pretty sure she was. Anyway, so maybe that's earlier than 65. But I'm saying I relate. I relate. You have an unhappy sun and an unhappy Venus and an unhappy moon. Now, at least Jupiter is trine your moon, and there's reception there by exaltation. You see, because the moon is exalted in Jupiter, the moon is exalted in Taurus, and Jupiter's in Taurus. You see, I bet you had children, but children maybe later in life. Difficulty with children because Venus isn't happy. Difficulty with children. Difficulty with childbirth, children who get involved in religion or spirituality or who reject it in some way. You were attracted to spirituality and the mystical stuff early on. You suck with money, I imagine. Like spending too much or getting into debt with Mars in the 8th house. It also lends itself to death and stuff like that. Anyway, the focus here is going to be on your health. Hopefully you've had sort of an okay career, right? With the sun conjunct your midheaven like that. Very prominent. But it rules your 8th house. So it may have been something where you got a bad reputation, or it's an unsavory job in some way. I don't know. Or it could be finance, payroll, banking, investments, things like that. We expect to see that kind of thing. You may have had a friend take their own life. Did you have a friend take their own life? 11th house ruler in the 8th house. Anyway, I shouldn't get morbid, but that's something that I do see with that, you know? So, but I really like this for you because it's getting your physical life in order. I think that's going to be important, you know? Ginger says, I could cry. You are so accurate. Oh my God, thank you. I really appreciate that. And I'm not trying to upset you, but I really want you to appreciate this time in your life coming up, you know? Because this is sort of forcing you to get your shit together and to face unpleasant things that you've sort of let by the wayside. And none of this is bad. It's going to feel good. Remember those 80s movies? You know, did you ever see like anything with John Candy? And there's always like a montage that happens, you know, it's a montage, you know, a montage that happens where you start cleaning all your shit up. I'm thinking of that movie Summer Rental with John Candy, where they clean up the boat, right? I don't know if any of you remember fucking John Candy. He was Canadian, but he was hilarious. Yeah. So I have such old references. Like, the 80s were the most cognizant I've ever been, you know, when I was a kid. I mean, technically you have Pluto trine the moon, which is a lot of dark stuff too and morbid stuff, you know. So, but you need to relax on the morbidity. That's also a Capricorn moon thing. It can be very gothy, very punk, very dark, you know. You didn't have goth in the 1970s when you were younger. You had more punk and shit like that, but it's very similar. You know, dead Kennedys. You had 10 years of trauma and you're crawling out of it. Well, you see, sweetheart, this is an important time for you. This is an important time for you because it's the beginning of the rest of your life. You can think about it as the beginning of the rest of your life. You're a first quarter moon also. That's a difficult moon. It's pushing against the current. It's building something up. It's forward thinking, but it's facing opposition. You see. Culpepper says they remember John Candy. Cool. Anyway, I do have to move on. You see, but this is very important for you. Very quickly, I'll say Mars is about to enter your 5th house. So you may have conflicts with your kids, but you may also meet a romantic partner. So putting that out there. So after Ginger, You would buy my merch? I'm a hoot. Oh my god, I need to start slanging my merch. I have shirts. I have Saturn Girls shirts that I designed. They're all my own designs. They're really good. God, I wish I could show you my fucking designs. But I had to close my Shopify store because I didn't like the material and I couldn't get all my tax stuff integrated right. I need someone to help me with it. I'm dyslexic, I'm neurodivergent, and I'm bipolar. So I need someone to fucking help me with that shit. Like, I'm a talker, I'm an astrologer, I'm a content creator. I'm not an editor. I'm not a fucking banker. I'm not a payroll person, but I'm trying to learn how to do all this shit. You know, I need some discipline. Anyway, who was after Gingy? Gingy Ginger. Alex? Are you still here, Alex? Oh, wait, no. Ginger and then Heather. Heather. One of my favorite movies is called Heathers. Heathers. Heather, are you here still? Heather, Heather, Heather. Heather, Heather, Heather. Heather, Heather, Heather. Heather, are you still here? Please tell me if you're still here, Heather. I'm going to give you a couple minutes. And I'm going to, straighten my hair. Heather, are you still here? I love Heathers. Straighten myself up a little bit. Heather is here. Heather MacArthur. No relation to Douglas MacArthur. Heather. Does anyone know the movie Heathers? With Christian Slater and Winona Ryder? Oh my god, they're both so hot. I had the biggest crush on both of them when I was like 6 years old. I was so enamored with both Winona Ryder and Christian Slater. Like, all the girls I was attracted to were all like gothy, like dark hair, dark eyes, Fairuza Balk, Christina Ricci, Jennifer Connelly, even Punky Brewster, but she wasn't so gothy, but that's still dark kind of thing. Who else was it? I'm sure I'll think of more later, but it was always those types. And then the bad boys, like Christian Slater and Corey Feldman. I had a thing for Corey Feldman. Like, oh my god. I mean, I still kind of like him, to be honest with you. Anyway, enough about that. Let's go back to... Who the fuck was this? Heather. Heather, 1985. Heather. Heather. Oh, and Heather noticed I was singing Nine Inch Nails. Every day is exactly the same. Every day is exactly the same. Heather is here for a reading right now. I better put her birth information in here. Where in Pennsylvania, Heather? It just says Pennsylvania. Where in Pennsylvania? Should I just say Philadelphia? Do you want me to just say Philadelphia? Where in Pennsylvania? Was it Transylvania? Transylvania. 4:24 a.m. In Pennsylvania, Pennsylvania. Hot stuff. I'm a huge fan of Nine Inch Nails too, since I was like 12 or 13 years old on. So that's like almost my entire life, or I don't know, whatever 41 minus 12 is. But I was the biggest Nine Inch Nails and Smashing Pumpkins fan. And actually, back in the day, I was the biggest Marilyn Manson fan. But he's a piece of shit. He's a fucking rapist. So fuck him. Allegedly. If you bipolar, how you doing tarot? If you bipolar, how you doing tarot? What the fuck does that mean? If you bipolar, how you doing tarot? I don't even know what that means. That doesn't make any sense. How does being bipolar preclude you from doing tarot? Like, what logic is involved in that? Can you explain? Can you explain what that means? Because that doesn't mean anything to me. It doesn't mean anything. It's so funny how spiritual people are so judgmental, you know. Pottstown, Pennsylvania. It's just such goofy nonsense. I've encountered so much hate in the spiritual community. It's really ridiculous. It's really ridiculous. And such denial of reality. You know, people just, they love to make shit up in order to fit everything to their wacky beliefs about things. You know, get stuff to conform. Anyway, you're a Libra moon like me. Look at you. Moon conjunct your ascendant. That's very prominent. And the moon rules your 7th house. You see, that's kind of a good thing for relationships in a lot of ways. Although Libra moons can be kind of codependent. So that's something you kind of have to be careful of, you know. Have to be careful of a little bit because we really want relationships. We really want people to like us. We really do. You're probably attracted to very confident people too, or successful type people, or very attractive. I'm assuming that you're into dudes, but very attractive men or women or NBs or whoever. It's like the arm candy thing. You want people to see who you're with. You know, you want to be proud of your partner, right? You want to be proud to be seen with your partner. You want to be on the arm of the prince. The prince, yes. That sort of thing. Saturn in the 11th house, feeling left out of everything. Feeling left out of everything. See, you have to watch out with Neptune on the ascendant. I call it the shape of water, right? Because water takes on the shape of whatever vessel it's in. And so there's a tendency to be very adaptive for good or for ill. For good, it can, and this depends on your intention. All of our intentions are mixed, of course. We all have selfish intentions mixed up with more altruistic ones, but most of us tend to be more selfish because we're human, right? And the more selfish presentation of this is being manipulative, right? Trying to manipulate people to do what you want. The more altruistic expression of this is adapting yourself to aid in a situation, right? Being able to, you know, be a chameleon, either by applying your skills to something that you know you can help with, or by trying to manipulate people into doing what you want them to do. Just a couple different expressions of that. So, it's interesting too, you have Venus and Mars conjunct and square your ascendant. When I see Venus and Mars conjunct together, especially in Aries, Venus is very unhappy in Aries because she rules Libra. She doesn't know what to do with herself there. Rather than being diplomatic and, you know, socially graceful, she's very brash, abrasive. Like when I was a kid, I was at an Elton John concert with my parents, and my dad took me into the boys' room with him to go to the bathroom. And I remember there was this woman in there who is like sitting in the urinal to go potty, you know. And I found a picture of something similar. And to me, that's how I make fun of Aries Venus. Like, look what you do, you know. It's sort of femininity turned on its head. And when Venus is conjunct Mars, for someone who was born female, it tends to give them a more assertive, masculine, sometimes abrasive, or men just don't like this because they're like so wimpy. Like men don't like a confident woman. They get all weird about it, you see. They get all insecure. But it's a lovely thing to have. To me, this is always very attractive. You know, I think it's very attractive. But it can be difficult too. You know. It can be quite difficult too because people will react weird to us or, not react to us well. And you have Mars and Venus technically square your ascendant. Anyways, I gotta stop reading that shit for a second. I gotta stop reading that shit for a second. But see, these are square your ascendant. So this whole weird, I shouldn't say weird, um, your assertiveness and your sexuality can be an impediment or a block for you. Or they can seem somewhat opposed. It could be a desire or something, that feels like it consumes you rather, because the dharma of a Capricorn rising is ultimately about giving things up. Like Pisces is the self-sacrifice sort of thing. But Capricorn's about achievement, right? Materially and spiritually. I hate that word, spiritually. But at a deeper level, it's about achievement on the behalf of others, right? Capricorn's the sign of initiation, about entering into new spaces of experience of ourselves. It's about reaching into the light of God, right? And bringing it back down to earth to show people what's possible. That's what initiation is. Remember the story of Moses? Right? Moses, communes with God in Genesis, or not Genesis. I forget what book that was. Or maybe it was Genesis. Exodus. He communes with God, the burning bush, right? The top of Mount Sinai. And he comes down glowing, radiating with the light of the divine. People can't even look at him. But he's an intermediary for that presence. And that's what Capricorn rising is supposed to be about, right? Capricorn in Vedic astrology was called Makara, right? These were like crocodiles. They were water serpent gargoyle deities that guarded ancient temples and ancient wisdom, And you can think of Capricorn like that. It's the intermediary for that. It's able to reach into the light and bring it down to earth in some way, right? Like we say, for those of you who are Christian, the Lord's Prayer, may thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven, right? It's the linking between those two, right? And there's a connection between Christ, or the Christ myth, and Capricorn, right? Because Capricorn is the sign of death. It's the winter solstice where everything dies. And when Venus and Mars are concerned with pleasure and desire and all these sorts of things, and self-assertion, all this can be sort of an impediment to recognizing that need to die. I don't mean physically, I mean understanding yourself in a new way. And with Neptune conjunct the ascendant, I imagine that's been difficult, right? And we've already talked about, right, all the superior conjunction shit in Jupiter in the 6th house, right? So that should already be apparent. Hopefully you've been listening to that. You have the North Node in the 5th house like I do, which often means we grow down as we grow up. Like we start to get more childlike after our late 30s, right? Going into our 40s. We start to get more sexual, more interested in pleasure. But if you were to read this from, say, the Vedic standpoint, they would look at it as the North Node, the house that's in, is what consumes us. And the 5th house is sex, right? And pleasure. I know for me, sex and pleasure sort of consume me. They consume my attention. And they take a lot of my attention away from this stuff and more lofty philosophical pursuits, just because, like, fuck, homie, I need to come like 5 times a day at least. Like, shit. But you could see how that sort of thing can consume us. I don't know if you've had that same experience, but when I see Venus conjunct Mars, it makes me think that may be a thing, right? Everything else is focused in your 2nd house. I mean, you have a lot focused there: Jupiter, Mercury, the sun, which again is about building up your life. Like Arnold Schwarzenegger had something similar, and he was building up his business for his young life, So, anyway, I hope that's some useful, interesting stuff for you, Heather. I'm going to go on to the next person. I hope that was useful. I don't know. I'm just fucking riffing. See, this the thing here. I'm looking at your stuff and going off, And it takes a long time to cultivate the ability to do that. Okay. Alex, are you still here? Alex, Alex, are you still here? Heather says, wow, sex has been consuming my mind. I mean, it consumes like all of me. So, yeah, it's my thing. Sex is my big thing. It's my main hobby. You know, my main hobby. So, Alexis, are you still here? Gushel, are you still here? Alex, my love, are you still here? Alexis, I'm sorry, I couldn't remember. Alexis Gushel. Alexis, sorry. Alexis Gushel. I will put your stuff in. Okay. Every day is exactly the same. What was the other one I was just listening to? Less than. So what are you waiting for? You've got what you asked for. Do you think what was wrong with you? Are you less than? Look what you gone done. Something, someone. Did it fix what was wrong inside? Are you less than needful? Oh, too many fucking people. Virginia. Cool. Focus. You didn't even notice. We got another Gemini rising. Gemini moon, like within minutes of their rising. Look at that. It's fucking wild, yo. Are you less than? Now look what you gone done. You got to go for the night. Thank you, Heather. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope it was good for you, like it was for me. I always say that shit, but I'm just trying to make myself entertained. You have Pluto conjunct the sun. All this stuff is focused in your 6th house, my darling. That can be very difficult. It can be very painful and a lot of healing. When I see Venus in the 6th house, I think of divorces or painful breakups, stuff like that. But with everything focused there, often it's about facing insurmountable odds. Like it can feel like that you're clawing your way uphill all the time. And I mean, you see, like Muhammad Ali had something similar. And Muhammad Ali was famous and successful, but then he took on the United States government, right? He burned his draft card for Vietnam, and he got into some big legal trouble. He knew he wasn't going to defeat the entire US government, right? But he took it on to make a point to show what was right. And I bet you can relate to that. Facing big fights that you probably won't win, but because it's the right thing to do. There can be a submissive type attitude here. A sense of self-sacrifice. But when Pluto is conjunct the sun, it's like we get periodically smashed and shattered. You see? We learn through crises. We learn about ourselves through crises. We can be very fixed and fanatic in our opinions until something tears us down and shows us the errors of our ways. Right? Not even necessarily errors, but that our sense of being no longer conforms to those ways of thinking. Scorpio Mercury is also quite paranoid, It assumes everyone is talking about them, and no one gives a fucking rat's ass about you. I'm sorry, sweetheart. I'm sorry. And you're having your Saturn return. So this is a big time in your life, And your Saturn's in the 10th house, which, it's a difficult time with mom oftentimes. But the other thing about it is that we are late bloomers in terms of life direction. It feels like we don't find our way until later in life. Sometimes our parents have expectations of what we're supposed to do. Like there's a family business, or like following one of your parents' footsteps, or some bullshit like that. And oftentimes we aren't able to do that. And we feel guilty about that in some way. You see? And we have to find our own way. And oftentimes we don't know what we want to do until we get older. You understand? I don't know if you can relate to that, but that's a frequent thing. I wonder if you have anything to do with the medical profession at all, because your 10th house ruler is Jupiter in the 6th house. I also see people who work in the service industry, hospitality. You see? We also see people who work with animals, or veterinarians, or whatever. We see people who work in hospitals. Excuse me. People who work in hospitals. When I see Pluto conjunct Jupiter, sometimes, there's a lot of billionaires or rich people who have Pluto conjunct Jupiter, but usually it's a very well dignified thing. I'm not saying you necessarily have that. But Sun conjunct Pluto is what comes out right away. It's like, wow, that's a rough one. That's a rough one. We learn by being smashed. And it's like David versus Goliath. It's always facing a giant. Always fighting a giant. But at least you have Moon conjunct the Ascendant, because it feels very important. And I imagine you always feel like perhaps you are equipped to face things. Or at least you're entitled to face them. And like no one else would if you didn't. Like, well, if no one else is doing this, it may as well be me. You see? But it's a Gemini moon too. So it's very flaky. Changes its mind a lot. Right? Can change gears. Constant shifts of emotion. Feelings. It also tends to overanalyze its emotions, doesn't it? Why do I feel this way? And it's good sometimes to analyze your emotions, but not at the expense of allowing yourself to feel them, right? Not at the expense of allowing yourself to feel them. Because that's how we process shit, isn't it? I bet you have road rage, maybe a bad relationship with one of your siblings, or fights with an uncle, cousin, or sibling. Chiron's in the 4th house, so I think of difficulties with the father. But Saturn typically takes precedence over Chiron, so I imagine it's more the mother. The mother. The mother. Although Dad was probably a workaholic. Either a workaholic or chronic health issues, because Mercury rules the 4th house is in the 6th. You see? But then again, Jupiter rules the 10th house of the mother and is in the 6th house as well in Scorpio. So she could have had chronic health issues or been a workaholic as well. But I imagine the mother was the more difficult parent. Excuse me. Excuse me. Anyway, we already talked about Gemini rising people with the Jupiter and the Venus and the Sun shit. Oh, Alexis says, yeah, definitely got the late bloomer thing a lot. Planning on to stay in academia, but plans change. Yeah. You see, Saturn rules your 9th house of academia and is in your 10th. So that makes perfect sense. That's probably what works best for you, to be honest with you. Excuse me. Turning 30. I wish I was turning 30. Life has been a huge battle, but I'm really in a good place right now with a lot of support. Good. Very good. Very good. Learning to feel, to rest, to set things down, to embrace the chaos. Difficult parental relationships growing up, but something with them now. Dad is a workaholic and has health issues. Yeah, and see, Mars has been going through your 11th house, which can have fights with friends or feel like people are against you or whatever. But Mars is going to go into your 12th house. So June 8th. So you need to be careful of self-destructive habits, right? Falling back into self-destructive habits. You're having your Saturn return, which is pretty wild. This is great. But you see, this is a crossroads. When Saturn goes through our 10th house, it feels like we lose out on opportunities that we were expecting. But the good side of it is it often forces us into a different life direction. For example, like I thought I was going to stay in hospitality forever. And I thought I was going to be managing restaurants and shit. And I didn't get a big promotion I was expecting. And it shifted all my life direction that eventually led here. You see? Which is totally not what I was expecting. But it was the best thing for me. So it might not necessarily be as good as that. But I guarantee you, over the next year, you're going to start to see light at the end of the tunnel, where opportunities, new and different opportunities you didn't expect, start to open up. Right now, you probably feel super fucking stifled. I bet you do. I bet you feel like maybe held back a little bit, or unclear, perhaps. But the smoke and the fog will start to dissipate. When I think of Saturn and Pisces, I think of the fog. You know, the fog. If you've ever read One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, right? The fog of the mind. Things are very unclear. So all that stuff will start to clear up, and especially around your sense of identity, because that's where all this Gemini stuff is going to be focused. It'll be about your relationship to yourself, but a more healthy one and a more objective one, where you understand your relative virtues and vices a bit better, and how to apply yourself with a new sense of motive. You have to understand why you're doing what you're doing. Astrology should be all about examining your motives, why you're doing what you're doing. And as I said earlier, we all have mixed motives. It's all a mix of selfishness and hopefully trying to aspire towards altruism. But it's usually mostly selfishness. But being honest with ourselves about why we do what we do is going to give us the opportunity to change and to be more in line with what we aspire to be, you know, to be more in tune with whatever our Dharma is. And the Dharma for Gemini is also, right, the Dharma for Virgo, the other Mercury ruled sign, is about turning Mercury inward. The Dharma for Gemini is turning Mercury outward, to relating to lots of different people, to see your commonality and your connection with all different walks of life, people of all different social strata. It's understanding people, cultivating relationships. Gemini's the twins. It's relating disparate beings to each other. It's seeing how the relationship between beings, existences, whatever, is the fundamental unit of life. You know? Our ability to... everything is interdependent. Everything depends on everything else for its existence. You see? And Gemini is learning to recognize that. To recognize the practicality of that. Right? It's learning not to discriminate. You see? Now it discriminates between this and that. Right? To pick things apart. It's knowledge. Right? But it doesn't have judgments. It learns to let go of judgments. It learns just to take everything in. It's like the bee that goes from flower to flower to flower and takes all that little pollen and brings it back, right, to the hive or the heart, where we synthesize that into honey, or the essence of it all, which is love. And what is love, pray tell? To me, this is my definition I've arrived at after many years of meditation on the subject. It's the progressive realization of one's own relationship to the rest of existence, to other beings. It's recognizing your part to play, your effect, your relative influence on the whole. That is love. And then acting consciously and accordingly, according to that realization, the relative realization of it, you see. Now, what did you say? Life has been learning to feel. Took a long time to figure things out, but now but I know that life will shatter many times during Pluto and Aqua. All about interconnectedness and bridging gaps through understanding. Yeah, that's the dichotomy between knowledge and wisdom. Knowledge is, it's nothing on its own. It's just a bunch of disparate facts and observations. But wisdom is how those all relate to each other and what they tell you practically about existence. What does it mean, if it means anything at all? I always say that the meaning of life is meaningless, right? Because I'm so stuck on the Nagarjuna stuff. But Nagarjuna, even, who espouses the idea of emptiness, that all things are empty of inherent existence, Nagarjuna is the first one to say it's not about it's neither existence nor non-existence, because both lead to contradictions. Rather, it's the middle way between the two. And that's very Libra, you see. It's about the balancing, right? That neither this nor that. Both simultaneously and neither. You see? And really the best way to approach all this stuff is through your relationship to yourself, which is what all this focusing in Gemini is going to be about. It's going to be about the relationship to yourself and understanding yourself in a new way, because that determines how you experience the rest of the world. We experience everything through a lens of our identity. And what the Buddha tells us and sort of showed us was that identity is itself a conditioned existence. It doesn't have any substantial existence. It's a mental projection, right? It's based on a misunderstanding. You see? Anyway, that's neither here nor there, but the question of identity is going to consume you over the next year and a half. And hopefully you start to cultivate a more healthy relationship to it. Because that's what this is all about. So anyway, we have to stop there though. I hope that made a little sense to you. I hope that was useful. If you didn't like the stream or subscribe to my channel, do it now. I'm going to be producing a Venus conjunction video very soon here. Very soon here. I have my script ready to go. I just have to film. Thank you for those of you who tipped me and donated. You keep me going. You keep me going, my sweet darlings. I love you all so much. I have to go now, but I'm going to go live again, hopefully this Sunday. Hopefully this Sunday. And hopefully, once again, either Monday or Tuesday, you know. So, please come. Some of you seemed very happy with, some of you seemed very happy with how I broke down your stuff, and I really appreciate that. Again, this is me reading according to my experience and to my understanding of astrology in general. So it's not always 100% accurate, but I really love that you, that many of you had that experience of me being able to give you relatively useful information, So once again, thank you for coming, and come again. Come again next time. Come this weekend. Thank you, Miss Colston. I love you too. I love you too, and I hope you all get something out of this shit. There were a lot of repetitive aspects and repetitive natal chart things. But you see, the pattern is also really cool because it gives us the theme for the night. So anyway, I love you all. Have a wonderful evening, and please come again. I should see you all Sunday. Bye.